Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Creative STEM Programming, Opportunities for Rural and Under-Resourced Areas. I'm Kristen Knorr with the North Dakota Afterschool Network, and I'm excited to welcome you to the closing panel discussion today. Youth in rural and under-resourced communities experience unique challenges, including distance to programming, proximity to mentors with a broad range of STEM backgrounds, and access to advanced technologies. Creative school-age programs across the country are helping reduce barriers to STEM enrichment by focusing on the strength of the communities. And this panel discussion will highlight a few communities who have leveraged resources and relationships to cultivate creative opportunities in after-school STEM programming. I'm going to turn it over to Carlos Santini, who is CEO of Mizzen by Mott, who will be moderating our panel today. Carlos leads and helps grow the Mizzen app as a key resource in elevating the quality of after-school programs for young people across the United States. Welcome, Carlos.
Yeah, Kristen, thanks so much. And welcome folks from all these amazing states. Some of them I've visited, but others I definitely have to, Vermont being one of them. But I love Colorado, been to Montana, great states. And so folks, I hope and we hope you've had a great conference so far. Honored to be able to host a panel, but we consider it more of a conversation on this very important topic around access, equity, and being able to have STEM programs succeed in rural communities. So I'm very honored to be a part of this. Like I was mentioned earlier, I've been at the helm of Mizzen by Mott for the last year and a half after almost 20 years in the out-of-school time space with the Afterschool All-Stars. Out of Los Angeles and at the national level. So I've been around this work. I always say, we'll bring a little math into this. You know, I turned 50 in January. If I look at how many years I spent in out of school time, of those 50, I spent 40% of my lifetime in out of school time programming when you think about it. So it's pretty amazing. So honored to be here and moderating this session. We're gonna put a little popcorn here as we introduce some of the other panelists introduce themselves. So I'll go ahead and hand it over to Toby to introduce himself.
Thanks, Carlos. I'm Toby Swafford. I am the State STEM Specialist for 4-H at Colorado State University. And one of the prompts we had was to talk about our STEM identity. So I was very lucky. I was actually born a while ago, 1965. So right around the time of the first moon launch. Was when I'd hit my kind of verbal explosion. I was 3.5 years old, and growing up in Central Florida, we were surrounded. It was part of the culture, and it was one of the first things I remember really getting excited about, talking about, and you know, being able to watch it on TV was fantastic. But then being able to run outside and see the rocket come up over the horizon. From the Space Center, which is about 45 miles away from where I grew up. You know, I was a STEM kid. And then I found, you know, pop culture references, and I have lots of them behind me, including Mr. Spock, who has continued to be a role model for me. So I got my STEM start, my STEM identity as one of those STEM kids at a very, very early age, and just really gravitated to it my whole life. Let's see, I'm in Colorado, so I'm going to turn it over to my neighbor, Monique.
Awesome, thanks, Toby. Hi everyone, Monique Harvey and Share has gone Zohanishlan, Kipachini, Bashachin, Tabaha Dashachain, Tetnizani Dashanele. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Monique Harvey. I am Navajo from Arizona. I am the Student Success Coordinator with American Indian Science Engineering Society. I am reaching out from y'all from Boulder, Colorado. And what my connection is with STEM is I am one of the few people that actually started in the STEM field in undergrad, and currently now and forever fortunate for this opportunity to outreach to students using our ACES resources. We provide scholarship and internship opportunities to our future STEM scholars. We continue to support them, help them thrive in the field of STEM, and it's an honorable opportunity to share these enlightenments with the students. And I'm forever happy to be in this position right now. And thank you all for coming to the panel today. I'll popcorn over to Ray.
Thank you, Monique. Hi, I'm Ray. I'm based out of Cleveland, Ohio. When I grew up, we didn't have any kind of rocket launches going on around us, but I did have railroad tracks right outside my back door. And what I had was mud and sticks, and I made little ant houses. So although it took me some time to grow into my STEM identity, I always had that like problem solving, do what I can with what I've got, kind of more engineering aspect of STEM. And these days I get to share that with students every day in our after school programs. And I'm so excited to bring them hands-on projects that they tell me that like, I want to learn about animals so I can fit into their interests and what they're excited about. And with that, Erin, you're up next.
Well, hello, I'm calling in from Bismarck, North Dakota. I'm not formally from here. I'm actually from Portland, Oregon. And so I am transplanted into the middle of the United States. My name is Erin. Like I said, I'm a former elementary educator, middle level educator as well. With that time, I was able to teach all grades K through 8. I was a former teacher of the year, and I absolutely love being in the classroom, but it was time for me to move over back to the Science Center. I started my journey here when I first graduated college, and now I'm back. I serve as a program delivery partner and coach mentor for First Robotics. So if there's any other people out there for First Robotics, I'm one of the region helpers up here. And now I'm serving as a programs director for North Dakota Gateway to Science. My STEM identity is really collaboration. And I feel that collaboration is really a catalyst for a stronger workforce and community. It's one of the reasons why you might see Buddy behind me. This is from Prairie Public. You guys have your local broadcasting networks with like Mr. Rogers, Prairie Public, Sesame Street. They partner with us. And so we have an event coming up as well. And so that's where you see the collaboration even in this room. I truly believe that my personal STEM identity is building and facilitating all of these partnerships. I really believe that everyone, whether you're a student, educator, you're someone working in this building, we are all STEM specialists. We just need to experience those opportunities that really help us develop our niche. So I always like to say the phrase, I know a little about a lot in STEM and everything else I just Google. And that's the fun way to put it, but really I coach people to find the direction of their passions and their strengths. And so if my passion is not in a certain area, I'm going to find where I need that avenue. And so I really feel like as we go through, we can build those passions and strengths. With students, I might give them a sample of everything. It's like a tasting at a buffet so they can build their self-efficacy and capacity. When I hire my own team and lead my team, I hire based on strength. Beginning in that interview, I ask them, what are your interests? Where's your passions? And then I'm going to continue supporting and growing their strengths as they work. I really see my role as a STEM identity as just being a bridge that everyone else is going to come across and just become stronger in their life. With that, I think we've introduced our 4 panelists.
Yeah, thank you, Erin. Thank you. And you know, the reason, folks, we started with the STEM identity as a question, and please feel free as you're hearing our panelists share how they developed their own identity, please share it with us. So members of the audience, feel free to share your story. Because when we look at this idea of these individuals and their programs, eliminating barriers by focusing on their community strengths, that community strength it begins to be established by real clear identity around how to approach programming. And there was a great story back in 2004 for me. There was a program in South Central LA that was hosting an event, and they wanted me to go visit. And I went there, and they were telling me it's going to be awesome, cool. I get there, and I get to the blacktop, and there's really nothing on the blacktop. It is bare. There's nothing, but kids are running around, having a good time, and I just and I'm like, what's going on here? And I look at the bottom, I look at the floor, and I see an entire world of chalk. And so what they did, because they had a freshly painted blacktop, and it was that deep black, they did a Galactic Olympics, all based on chalk. So they did a periodic table hopscotch. They did, what else? A solar system graffiti. They did an ecosystem chalk art walk. And so they took this kind of strength of their school, which was a vibrant, deep blacktop, and they did a Galactic Olympics with all chalk. And so it just tells you, right, what individuals are doing to promote awesome STEM programming. And so we're going to have a series of conversations and questions. And from the audience, I invite you, as you hear something that really kind of grabs your attention, drop a question in the chat so that we can look at that and address it and include you in the conversation as well. But since we started with identity, I'm going to open this up. And Erin, I'm going to go to you real quickly here, because as you establish your own STEM identity, what are ways that programs and individuals, how can they start that journey of discovering and building their own identity as a program, as a practitioner, and why does that matter?
It goes back to our vision statement for North Dakota's Gateway to Science, and that is that we are here to inspire the scientist in everyone. And so when I build my identity and when we facilitate the identities of our people, our participants, we want them to also know that we inspire them to become anything in the STEM aspect. When we're developing programming, we have shifted from having themes. We were very successful in the past, 8 or 10 years ago, where we had Lego camps, and then we had a human body camp, and we loved that. But the kids that went to those camps never got to experience every other aspect of STEM. And it's not just Legos, it's not just health. So we turn the tables, and now we just have a full broad of STEM camp. So every student that comes in is going to sample things. They may not like everything every day, but we're going to give them all opportunities. And every program we have, we make sure we cover the four core, science, technology, engineering, math. Something in there needs to be touched upon in every program. We also need to be very cognizant of biases that exist. In my area, we deal with a lot of our Plains Indigenous communities, and they have communicated to us that they kind of shy away from the word STEM, because to them, science is art. It's a part of how they are in their life and their movement. And so when we work with local Indigenous communities, we need to recognize that they don't see it as a science, they see it as an art. And their whole life revolves around that artist aspect. And so being cognizant of that aspect when we're creating programs, we go to the local areas, those local industry leaders, and say, how can we develop around you what your interest is? When it comes to interviewing and getting educators on your team, one of the best things you can do in an interview is say, what is your passion in STEM? And two things that always exist in my interviews. The first question is, what are your favorite age range? Not what you've taught with, what's your favorite age range? And I go preschool, early elementary, secondary, middle, high, and then I even say, we go to elders, all the way up to our elder population. And I just want to know, where's your interest lie? I also break down all the different STEM subjects with science. And I say, what's your passion? Is it chemistry? Is it medical health? Is it robotics? From there, I can build a capacity and understand who I'm working alongside, and we can work on those strengths. We hire on people's strengths. So I'm going to continue to evaluate and grow and professional development with those strengths as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Erin. Can you tell the passion, right? In Erin's description of her own STEM identity and that advice. And it's cool even to see the chat that a lot of folks are listing that family has played a big role in their STEM identity, which to me, it's like, that's pretty cool. You don't always necessarily hear that, but it's great to see everything from agriculture to other aspects of a family business or an interest, to see that being reflected. For some other panelists, Monique, Ray, or Toby, what stands out to you as what advice or what are some steps that local programs can take to develop that strong identity?
I'll go. I think, yeah, being able to see yourself in science. We've probably all been familiar with the story of asking students to draw a scientist, and 9 times out of 10, it's a picture of a middle-aged white guy with glasses and, test tubes, and they look like me. But changing that up and asking someone to draw themselves doing science. I start to see pictures of kids out in the field, working with animals, digging in the dirt, being in the water, and they can start to see that. When I'm working with educators, and a lot of the folks I work with say, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a STEM person, I'm not comfortable with this. And my job, as a coordinator in the state office, is to work with all of our 4-H leaders and get them comfortable with that. And so I'll ask them, it's like, what are you passionate about? Going back to what Erin was mentioning. And it's like, oh, I love to talk about cooking with the kids. Great, you're doing kitchen chemistry. You're doing measurements, you're doing, the procedure and order. So you're doing the science, you just need to start thinking about it through the lens of a science educator. So it's getting people comfortable with that. And, showing them that it can be fun, it can be engaging. I do STEM programming, but I also do STEAM, I do STREAM, especially with libraries where we'll incorporate reading and a story time, usually with characters that the kids can identify with and start to see themselves. The joke used to be that we'd throw in humanities or history, scramble up the letters and make it hamster. But that's actually happening. There's a hamster movement in Great Britain right now. Finding those different types of things where you don't know what's going to stick. Loading up a program with, some history, with some art, with some, cultural things. What happened when this invention or discovery was made? Why did the person do that? Because you never know what's going to stick. I had one kid who just loved word origins, and so do I. So we'd bond over that. And every time I threw in a new word, I didn't shy away from the big scientific words, but I break them down and look at how those words came to be. And so, just taking those, bits of interconnectivity and finding those different sparks, because just that little spark sometimes can ignite, a lifetime of learning.
Yeah, you never know what's going to stick. That's a
Absolutely.
great point. For folks listening here, there's an interesting definition or an approach to identity from the National Science Teaching Association. And they define identity as the way people answer questions such as, who do I think I am? Who can I be? Where do I belong? How do I think other people see me? Right? So when you think of that, it's kind of an interesting way to be able to look at identity from kind of like that purview of questions. Monique, Ray, any one of you, one last, maybe one of you can answer this question around STEM, and we can move on to our second question.
I just kind of want to reinforce what Toby was mentioning about the connectivity and illustrating the connection between the learning elements to students. And for example, ACES holds a high spectrum of programs from K through 12 all the way to college and beyond to professionals, from webinars to suggesting from guest appearances, sharing their experiences in the STEM field. We've seen progress of them pursuing that STEM field as well. And then, for example, with kindergartners, I want to say all the way to second grade, we have a program team that works specifically on helping students build a kind of like a R2-D2 of Star Wars, and then remotely moving it the way they wanted to, and then understanding the elements that connect that R2-D2 and what those connectivities are, and then just using their hands and realizing that their hands as well as tools to making this construction, and then also learning their own minds of ways of making this robot. And so we understand that connectivity, and again, illustrating, like you said in the chat, illustrating how well it is of learning these elements and then using it later on in the future. And then of course, developing the career going forward as an engineer, as an architect, as a scientist. And so I think that's really enforced and really positive to push forward to our future scholars.
Awesome, thank you, Monique. And Ray, I can't let you be the odd one out. I gotta, you gotta throw one, at least something in here. I don't want to do that to you. What are your thoughts around other programs and them building their identities as STEM programs?
So a lot of my students think that they aren't scientists as well. So when we're starting off, or when I'm first meeting them and getting to work with them, I want to build up their confidence and tell them like, oh, you kept working on that. I really like that perseverance, and kind of foster some of that growth mindset. So even if they still at the end of the day decide I'm not a scientist, I still have then built up that relationship and some evidence with them that, oh, you say you're not a scientist? Well, look at that cool thing you built that you worked really hard on, that you drew a picture of, you tried to build it, it broke, you tried it again. That's exactly what a scientist does, to try to convince them using what they've already done.
Awesome, thank you, Ray. And folks, I think what you're hearing here is when you think of barriers, when you think of locations where STEM programs happen and some challenges from rural communities, what you're hearing is if you build a strong sense of interest and drive in STEM, STEAM, STREAM, young people will find a way. They'll find a way to connect back to the disciplines behind the sciences. So they're going to get there. And so thank you folks for sharing some really great insights around identity. And of course, we've got the challenges and opportunities when it comes to having STEM in rural settings. And so Monique, I was curious here if you can talk to us a little bit, as I look at your circle of support page, right? I looked at your website, I looked at the ACES circle of support. What are some ways that even partnerships can address issues of some of the challenges in rural settings? And you can extend beyond that, whether it's partnerships or other strategies as to how programs can engage with some of these potential challenges and barriers.
Yeah, so with ACES, what we do, I kind of previously mentioned earlier that we have a lot of STEM programs geared to students all the way starting from kindergarten to high school to college and beyond. And so what we mostly do is we create partnerships with organizations like Apple, 3M, Google, and how we do that is we highlight the strength of our scholars. And this goes all the way from schools to our scholars applying to all of our scholarships and interns. We highlight that strength, and then we also want to emphasize a little bit more on the barriers that encompasses what is, hard for them to address more, like why isn't science a subject that's stronger in the school. And we also want to emphasize like the existing programs are in the school, like maybe a computer science club or a coding club or anything in that realm. And then even a gifted program as well. We use the strength of the schools, the community itself, and then we kind of build on that going forward. And so again, through that, we idolize it to our partners, our collaborators, and say, hey, we have this school, we have this community that has this existing program. It shows great potential and it's showing great skill improvement from our students. And we definitely want to continue that build of self-esteem and confidence of our future scholars. So we hope that with that being said, that they'll endorse that and continue to fund those programs, to even provide training. For example, we have a school on Navajo Nation with the Hopi tribe. They have a Native Coders Club. They are partnered with us with ACES, and it's through Intel. So with Intel and our partner with Intel, we were able to create a program in that school where we're able to fund some more supplies for them. We even provided a travel stipend to them to attend a national conference that ACES hosts every year. And so with that being said, they were able to provide those resources and assets building to the school as well. So again, this can work a lots of ways, but I would say definitely if you are starting small right now in the school or in community and the club may not be as strong as you want to be right now, I would say look at potential partners who you think would greatly provide future asset and strength to that program. And ACES is one that is more than happy to create that establishment, that bridge, to make that happen for the school and the community. So we are definitely more open to sharing how the strategies can be made, how that partnership can be made. So definitely ACES has definitely been a great asset in making those connections happen.
Awesome. Thank you, Monique. And so you've partnered for success to meet these challenges. And so for the rest of the panelists, I'd like to ask y'all, what are some of the most obvious and common challenges when providing STEM programming in rural areas, right? What are those most common? And folks on the chat, please share that with us as well, because we want to learn from you. Like, what are the challenges that you've engaged with? And what are some things you've done to overcome some of those challenges? And so maybe if any one of our three panelists can maybe share, what are some of the most obvious and common challenges that you're seeing?
I'll go ahead and jump in. My job is to serve all four corners of the state. We changed our name 2 years ago to a new mission. We no longer were Gateway to Science. We became North Dakota's Gateway to Science. And what that did is that expanded our borders to spreading out everywhere. And so I see that, Rachel, you mentioned transportation costs, and that is a huge thing. It's transportation, and we got rid of that. We now come to them. We have a traveling science program. We travel in a van. That's actually right after this conference today. I'm jumping in the van and heading to a school of 80 kids to deliver an after-school program to deliver during conference night to get those families involved. And so there are champions in our area that can help pay for that. And what you do is you look for the local industries within those towns. We were fortunate to be given a grant through NASA to become a community anchor. And with that, we were able to set aside some money, earmark it, to just reach out the community and travel the four corners of the state this last summer. And we went to small towns and we said, what do you need? We don't want to be a helicopter coming in, dropping off our resource and then walking away saying problem solved. We want to know what you need. And one of the really small towns in North Dakota, I think their population was 300, they said, our plumber's retiring next year and we have no one around to become a plumber. And that is the issues in these small areas, is they need help with that. And so I worked with them and I talked to the company and I said, hey, we'll develop an activity to go to your school about plumbing, kind of that career technical experience. And they paid for it because they know that value and that rate of return, that rate of investment is going to be maybe one of these kids in that class that I just visited thought this might be cool and I can stay in town with my family. And so working with local industry leaders to solve that, helping you pay for that transportation, that's where we were able to get through that barrier of being able to make it there.
Yeah, thank you, Erin, because we got a great comment here from Christine around consistency and connection, right? That's a big part of helping overcome barriers. Toby, Ray, anything to add around what are some of the most common barriers and how you're overcoming them?
I think a few people mentioned in the comments, and yeah, it comes down to just kind of time and space. The amount of time it takes to get to a rural community, the distance involved, and I've had that conversation where when I was a county 4-H agent in Larimer County, which is 2,600 square miles, it's a lot of territory to cover. And some of the communities are easily 45 minutes to an hour drive away from Fort Collins, where I'm based. And I had to justify, it's like, all right, you're spending 2 hours in the car going and coming from a 45-minute interaction. Is it worth it? And it's like, to those kids, absolutely. And yeah, being able to get up there once a month, it doesn't seem like it makes that big of a difference, but if you're in a rural area and you know that someone has spent some time and is planning every month to come and visit you, to those kids it makes a huge amount of difference. I will measure that just in the sheer amount of hugs I get at the end of a program in a rural area, and the kids that don't want me to go versus the kids that I see on a weekly basis, where I'm a more set fixture. So yeah, it does. It's definitely worth it. Finding that way to be consistent, to support what's going on, whether you're there or not. Sending emails to the people that are facilitating the programs. Getting questions from the youth that you're serving. What are they interested in? Building programming around that. Putting them in charge. What are the subject areas they want to know about? Chances are I've probably got a program or two already in that area, but sometimes they ask me something and it challenges me. And that, for me, I celebrate with the kids when they ask a question I don't have an answer for, because it gives me a chance to learn. And we'll do it together and we'll discover that. And if I don't know, I tell them I don't know. And if I'm in an area where I can't get a signal on my cell phone to look it up with them, it's like, I'm going to go home and find that. And I'm going to get back in touch with you and I'll send an email with that response. So being, true to that word and celebrating those opportunities. And some of the places I go, bandwidth is a huge issue. One of the community libraries, they have a satellite link and they're the only people in several miles around that have internet access. So yeah, being able to go someplace, and I know that there have been people in the parking lot of the library late at night downloading homework assignments for their kids. Being able to be there in person is so much more important than what we're doing here. This is a great way of covering the distance if you have the bandwidth, but there's nothing like taking the time to spend with a child and show them that they are important to you.
That's such a great point, Toby, because I think when we look at overcoming barriers, I think the idea of fostering true connection goes a real long way. And I've been in those situations where I go visit a program, and if you show connection to a kid, to a child, to youth, they like seize it, they notice it. It's almost like that line from Bear With Me Here, Jerry Maguire. Remember when the kid said, you know that bees can smell fear? Remember that one? That one? I think kids, they can smell, authenticity. They can smell connection, and they seize on it. So I think what you're sharing here, this idea around, and I think someone said this earlier, real champions don't just assume and they give you, I think Aaron, you said this, but they ask, what do you need? So I think you have to find those true champions that take the time to sit, ask you those questions, and connect. I invite members of the audience to please let us know what are some of the ways that you're overcoming barriers, because we want to learn from you. And I think, and we can spend, because this is STEM in rural settings, the whole conversation could be just about this topic, but alas, we cannot do that today. But there is an area adjacent to this topic, which is resources and access challenges and opportunities. STEM has traditionally been, I grew up at a school time when STEM, for me, it seemed like a very expensive and resource heavy subject or activity or experience to put together. And so I want the audience to think about what does STEM look like for you in regards to investments and costs. Is cost still a barrier to offering great STEM experiences? And I did want to ask Ray here, I'd love for you to, based on your work, to touch on this element around resources and access and investments in STEM, right? Any insights you want to offer the audience here?
First, if you are just getting started in STEM, I want to reassure you that you can do it very low cost. You can even find ways to do it with very little prep time and completely free. A walk outside to walk around the building. You can practice your observational skills of what do you see, what do you hear, what's that over there? If you see a squirrel running up a tree, you can make a hypothesis, why is the squirrel doing that? And then you can think as a group and bring that community building on a simple STEM project. And then that builds up your confidence and your students' confidence to try even more projects. Ultimately, though, it's going to be either an investment in either your time to gather and prepare materials like recycling. I spend a fair amount of time at my home taking labels off of glass bottles and, sorting stuff out of stuff I could use later for marble runs or whatever. Or it's going to be an investment in money. If you have a budget to pull from, then I would suggest getting things that are usable across many projects that facilitate building, like tape. I love canary cutters, which are like little saws for cardboard. So you can combine things that have a minimal cost with no cost to broaden what your students are able to do. If you do have some time to invest, look out there for grant opportunities. As Monique was talking about partnerships. I've gotten a NASA grant recently that let me pay for some tablets and some robots. And yes, I use the tablets and the robots for the specific NASA program. But now that I have those resources, I am able to take those and go to the kindergartners. And last week we played a game where they sent the robot to make a letter on their programming. And then all the other students would watch it and try to guess what letter the robot was spelling out. So yes, you can do STEM low cost. Yes, you can do STEM high cost. It's just depends on what you are able to put into what your community needs and what's engaging to your students.
Thank you, Ray. Any from the rest of the panelists, anything you want to add to this topic around investments and resources?
Yeah, Ray, you hit it pretty much right dead center. Yeah, when you have the money, absolutely invest it in things that you can reuse. But in the comments as well, I saw people saying, I love if you have running water and a piece of paper, you can do STEM, and that's absolutely right. I do whole programs with nothing but paper and a little bit of tape and some scissors, where we look at Mobius strips and cylinders and things along that lines, and then we cut them up and they form different shapes. And, being able to do things with what I refer to as kind of junk drawer science, the stuff that we all seem to have in that one drawer in the kitchen, or sitting on my desk. It breaks down those barriers. If I can do something with, a youth in a classroom setting, that's fantastic. If they can reproduce that at home and it goes from the, classroom to the dining room, that is a really, really good day at the office for me. And they get to be the expert then. They get to share and demonstrate what they did. And, they get to then talk about, the concept behind it. So yeah, it doesn't take a lot of money. Finding those grants, finding those inexpensive items that you can get and share. I'm just looking at my desk. I've got a flashlight that is made from a popsicle stick and a piece of copper tape, an LED, a little button battery, and a binder clip. And so, we talked about simple circuitry, and instead of just talking about it, we had the kids make something they could take home. And, this is less than 50 cents per child, which is a pretty good investment. And a lot of my programs, it costs a whole lot less than that to go out there. And my investment is just time. So yeah, finding those ways of doing things. Behind me, there's an old drill that got repurposed, and we put a crank onto the drill. And if you turn an electric motor, it becomes a generator, and it makes enough power to make a little Wigglebot dance around on this plate behind me. That drill was found in a garbage can here on campus. So yeah, scrounge around, see what you can find. Get creative, talk to people who like to tinker, encourage the kids to tinker. We used to do take apart days where people would donate their old PC towers and things along that lines. And we'd have the youth take those things apart and put them back together. Made a variation of the operation game where the kids had to locate the different parts of the computer and take it apart. So yeah, find those things that are somebody else's trash. They can be your treasure as well.
I think we just found the 2020 version of MacGyver here in Toby. I don't know if y'all saw MacGyver in the 80s, but no, I think that's great advice, great practical advice. And look, I mean, I'll throw in a quick plug because it's free and I'm going to do it, and I'm moderating, so why not, right? So, I mean, go to Mizzen. I mean, and I put in our URL in terms of Mizzen.org a little more, because it's a free resource, no strings attached, and 20% of our content is STEM related. And Toby, you made a great point around Tinker. Folks forget that Tinker and Maker can be very low cost ways to engage in creative. And on the A part of, like, when you think of STEM, when you add the STEAM piece, right, the arts and design piece, you can definitely use Maker and Tinker as a key component of that. Erin or Monique, anything to add there in terms of resources?
Yeah, just real quick. I would say you don't have to look far to have a great STEM experience. Definitely in the backyard in your local community. Just to share a quick example, we do a college and career preparation for students up in Portland, Oregon. We recently just visited the reservation of Cow Creek, and the elements of that school and that community is amazing. They brought in cultural representation regarding to STEM field. This includes the huckleberry revitalization as well as the water life. And a lot of the students, I was very impressed. I did not know much about huckleberries, nor did I know about fishes in the creek. So they are amazing. And teachers and even the career people said that they bring students outside and they bring them to the waters. They introduce the life of a tree, especially when it regards to the wildfire. So a lot of that elements came in full circle for them. And to this day, Cow Creek still actually hosts internships for juniors and high school students to help them for college. So definitely, I would say partnership, grants, and definitely looking inside as well as around your community and in your backyard for support is definitely worth a try. So
I guess I'll round it off. Sorry, Carlos. I guess I'll round it off. So, I think you're right, Monique. You really made a good point. It's those strong connections and partnerships. Carlos has an amazing program with Mizzen. They have amazing free resources. I use North Dakota's Afterschool Network. I know Courtney Shuli's online and Kristen Knorr, and we've created an online facilitation through Courtney's program where we do an online every like twice a month, maybe 4 times a month, sometimes 6 times a month, where anyone all over can jump in, out of school network people. We are live. We also do recordings. I make sure when I make those lists that they are very cheap. It's a piece of paper, pencil. I make sure that it's accessible, not just for a classroom in a large school, but a classroom in a small school or even a homeschool mom. And I think if we look around, we can find the free program and to continue finding those strong connections and partnerships with organizations. I have a very strong one with our local corporation for public broadcasting here. It's called Prairie Public. I think in Colorado, it's Rocky Mountain PBS. Those people are your champions to help you pay for these things. They also serve the same mission. Find organizations who share the same mission with you, and you can go from being at one event a year to 6 or 8 events a year. So for example, we kind of all take turns piggybacking the bill, right? It's like, I'll pay the bill this time. And I get done at an event, and that's really why someone's joining me today. I got done at an event and they said, I want you back. And I know in my mind, we can't afford it, but I'm going to find someone else who shares the same mission. He's like, I want to go. Cool. I'm going to go with you though. So now they're paying for the bill the next time. And I've been able to build partnerships with one of our really strong Mandahatasa Rickarod Nation, MHA Nation here in North Dakota. And I have been able to go up there 8 times this year. And those kids know my name. They hug me. I even brought them an astronaut because I find places, and we just keep coming back, making those organizations, you know, sharing your missions, joining you. You can really cross that barrier with those finance issues that you may have with your own organization.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Erin. And, you know, I'm going to rewind a little bit to some of the inspirations for STEM identity. And earlier it was families, right? And I know our panel has a real keen interest in sharing some of their approaches to engaging families in STEM programming. And so, Monique, I'd like to turn to you. What are suggestions you can share on how to best support rural families in overcoming some of these challenges and fears, right, when it comes to STEM, and for them to have a better understanding of how to approach the work?
Yeah, it's actually a great question. So what we potentially do for ACEs on our end with our programs is we build on the strength of the child. One of our PK-12 team actually just shared with us a story of a student. He had interest in Legos, and so, but he was so good at Legos that he was able to make it move electrically without like power source. So he was very impressed by that. And through that involvement, they build on his skill a little bit more through involvement with the Native American Science Engineering Science Fair that we host every year. And with NASEF involvement, the school was able to fund money to send him to the science fair, and he actually won, I want to say, one of the top 5 prizes of the science fair through his innovation with Legos. And so with the family involvement and through like sharing with them the skills of their student, their child, and also like even in the classroom, this can definitely raise to the occasion of like, hey, you know, we see a lot of potential of our students and we want to build on this more further. And so what we do with ACEs is we ask the school themselves, like, hey, do you have an existing program right now for the school? And if they do not, then we arise to asking our funders, our collaborators, our partners, even applying for a grant to say like, hey, you know, we actually have a program that's in place right now. We are asking for additional funding for further support. And so that, again, not only endorses one student, but the whole school entirely. So I think that's definitely something we definitely look forward to in involving families. We often encourage them to look at further opportunities for their students. ACEs right now doesn't have a lot of curriculum or build on what engagement with families, but I would say definitely one is just making it announced and aware to the families of their student skill. I'm not sure if other panelists have further advice to add on to that, but I would say that's our viewpoint right now from ACEs.
Yeah, other panelists, what are your thoughts? Because one of the things when we think about family engagement is this idea of the unknowns. I remember when we started doing overnight programming with After School All Stars LA, Latino families, for us to have our kids leave and stay overnight somewhere in their middle school years was not a thing. Like that's just something I grew up with. I didn't grow up with going to overnight experiences, and a lot of my community, Latino community, didn't engage in that. It was an unknown. So what are ways that we can make STEM known and understood by families, right? So we eliminate that kind of like sense of fear or not knowing the value. What are some things from the panel that you can shed some light on regarding that dynamic?
I'll jump in on this. So a lot of our programs, like most of our day-to-day programs, the students are at school, they stay in their school building, and then they come to us for after school programming. So it's a very consistent kind of schedule, and it's a consistent set of kids. So we have the time to build those relationships with families, especially ones with multiple siblings, where we get to see them for many, many years ongoing at once. Even with that said, sometimes our parents don't know what we're doing. Surprisingly, Instagram has been important in parents seeing what their kids are doing. We host like family engagement nights. We're like, hey, parents, come have a dinner with us. Come see what your kids have been doing lately. But getting them in person is still a struggle sometimes because they have so many draws on their time. So whatever way is going to work for you and your families to reach them, if it is social media, if it is a conversation at the door during pickup, if it is, hey kids, go tell your families this and give them a stem to get, conversation happening for the night, find out what is working and what that is for you.
Awesome, right? Instagram and parents, that is something.
I love that. You have to remember that we have millennials now as our parents. And so we are Instagram. We're actually phasing out of Facebook. And I've been trying to tell our marketing director that. So thank you, Ray. I've got another reason we got to do Instagram. Bringing in families is really important. That's part of our mission. And out of school time, you have them during the out of school time. So obviously the parents are at work. That is why your mission is so important to any organization, is you're helping those kids from that 3:30 to 5 time because our parents are working. And so sharing what they've done, and Instagram is great, but having those family nights and bringing them in is even more important. Locally, again, I keep going back to our population up here, but we work with a lot of culturally diverse families, and they gather around food, and food is where magic happens. And so creating family nights where you can bring in some food and bringing in some other partners and doing some STEM challenges to get parents involved is so important. Our family nights, we also go back to looking at the ages. When we develop family nights, they're not going to happen as often with out of school time. But when you do have those nights, make sure you pick activities for preschoolers, because you're gonna have families bringing those little kids. They don't have daycare. Have some fun preschool activities, but then you're gonna get some adult activities too. It was amazing how many fathers were on the floor trying to build Lego cars out of Duplos. And those dads were really doing a great job on the floor, and they loved it. They were racing with their kids. And that's something that we do here, is we model how to love STEM. And so every activity, we make parents be involved, because they don't realize they also have that capacity.
That's so great. So such great advice there. And it's interesting you talk about food and bringing families together via food. I was a week ago, I was cooking, and I was the only thing I had was coarse salt, right? So the large kind of grain salt, and I was making some eggs, and I was thinking I'll put this in here and heat will kind of like, break down the salt. And my daughter was like, no, Dad, salt is not soluble just by heat alone. You have to add water. And if you're going to do it by heat, it's extremely high temperatures. Right? So yeah, there's some science in cooking, so let's bring that in. So no, great point, folks. And I think we're going to have our final question here. We'll do a quick lightning round, because we've had a chance to look at identity, right, as a building block to breaking barriers in the STEM world. We talked about how to engage with rural programming challenges and some obstacles. The idea of access and investments and expenses around STEM, and what are ways that we can work around that. The role of families and the importance of engaging with them. And so that provides a lot of content and context for folks to take back with, to kind of work with. The final thing here is just practical advice and tips, right? So as programs sit and listen to you today, what can they do today, next week, next month, to start leveraging resources and relationships to cultivate creative STEM? What can they do to start inventing some creative ways and workarounds to address the issue of expense or investments that are maybe higher than they're comfortable with? Just what are some practical steps that they can do today, next week, next month to apply some of what you shared with today? And we'll start with Toby, and then we'll go through each one of you.
Yeah, that's a big topic. And I think we've touched on it a couple of times. It's like you don't have to spend a lot of money. Being there, being present is so important. Finding out what the needs are in the communities and how can you address some of those needs. Seeing who else is doing what you're doing. Quite often we'll encounter other people who are doing the exact same type of programming we're doing, and they're doing it here and we're doing it over here, and we need to bring those things together. So find those partners. A lot of your different companies, even your utility companies will have outreach where they do education programs. Find out what their program on electricity looks like. How can you tie into that? Here in Colorado, we have energy co-ops in a lot of our rural areas, and they all serve a different area, but they also come together, and they provided funding to put together a mobile energy lab, which is a trailer that can travel around the state of Colorado and has a lot of hands-on interactive elements, so you can set it up at a community event like a street festival, a county fair. And at that point, everyone says, hey, I want to see what happens when I turn that crank. And so you'll get that intergenerational of the family getting to explore. And you'll see the parents send the young people up first to check it out. And then you can tell that they really want to try it too. So invite them in, have them talk about, what do you think just happened? So yeah, I think tying it all together is get out there, do it. Open yourself up to the possibilities of partnering with different organizations, seeing who else is doing something similar to you. How can you add bandwidth? Find ways of making what you're doing relatable. A community need, they need a plumber. That is a very specific need. And we talk about STEM, and a lot of times I think we forget that it's not just pushing people towards careers in science and engineering, but the technology piece is so important. So technical and trade schools, can be very accessible ways of gainful employment, finding careers. When I talk about STEM careers, I don't just talk about somebody in a lab coat in a very sterile environment. I talk about people in a kitchen. I talk about people at the mechanics shop. I talk about the person that does the HVAC. It's like all of this is very important. And, just showing people that they are scientists, that they are capable of doing STEM, that they're already doing it, and getting them excited. I think that helps to break down some of those barriers. Identifying what can be a barrier. During COVID, a lot of us pivoted to doing things that were, virtual. And a lot of the rural communities got left out because they didn't have that access. So we started putting together science in a bag kits, where it was a brown paper bag. It had a full write-up of the background, some of the history, the step-by-steps, all the materials that were needed. And we partnered with our local food banks, and they were delivering our STEM in a bag kits along with, food going out to the food pantries in the rural areas. And the best comment I ever got on that was, young person jumped out of the car with the parents to get their food. They saw we had 2 new activities, punched the air and said, yes, Happy Meal of Science. And I wish I could patent that, but I think Happy Meal is already taken. But that excitement and that accessibility, is what, again, drives what I do. And I think what so many of us do out there. So yeah, just be open, say yes. I'll let somebody else talk.
Yeah, no, listen, what we're going to do, because we're a little short on time. So what I'd like for Aaron, Ray, and Monique to do is, as we're doing the final piece of our time together, if you can just drop in your gems, right? Your next pieces of advice for folks to read as we close out our time. But really, folks, Toby, Aaron, Monique, Ray, thank you so much for your enthusiasm, your creativity, your practical advice. And for the other three panelists, please drop in your next steps for folks, like what are those tips and tricks for them as they move forward from this panel. So thanks, folks, for the time. And at this point, I'll hand it over to Jill Young to continue our time together. So thank you. Appreciate you all.
Hi, thank you. Here, give me a second and I'm gonna get my slide set up. Okay. All right, awesome. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Carlos, and to the panelists for this thoughtful conversation. I think what's really cool, what was really cool for me is just to hear very clearly your passion for STEM and for working with young people. And I think that actually relates to what I'm about to talk to you about. So my name is Jill Young. I'm a senior researcher with the American Institutes for Research. And we launched a nationwide survey called the Power of Us Workforce Survey, which aims to capture the voices of the adults who work with young people. So this is a first of its kind study, national study, and it's aimed at understanding the experiences of people who work with young people outside of the regular school day. So that includes staff that are paid, staff that are unpaid, staff that are full-time, part-time, current staff, past staff. Basically, we want to hear from everybody. And this also is relevant for you if you're part of a rural program, a large program, or rural, urban, large, small. Really, we want to capture the diversity of the OST field and the professionals that support the workforce. The idea is that with this data, we can inform professional development, and we can also inform policy, practice, and further research in the field. So we promise no story is too small to share. We really want to hear from you. And in contributing to the workforce survey, you'll be making the profession as a whole stronger. The whole idea is that if we know more about this important workforce, then we can do more to support staff, to retain staff, to develop different types of career pathways for staff. So if you haven't taken the survey, I really hope that you consider taking it. That way we can make sure that we just capture all of the voices. I believe this is a really exciting opportunity to elevate this incredible workforce. So I'll make sure that I drop this in the chat, and you can also look at the QR codes, but there is a Power of Us booth. So take a minute to take the survey. You should be able to select Ready STEM Go conference is how you've heard about the survey. And then on Thursday, we're doing a drawing. We'll select 3 attendees who took the survey, who said that they heard about the survey through this conference, to get a $50 gift card, which is no small thing. I mean, I would take a survey for free food, so that's just me. But please consider taking it, and then please join us for day 2 tomorrow. So we'll have we'll kick off the day with Dr. Quincy Brown, STEM Next Fellow and Director of Space, STEM, and Workforce Policy, and that'll be at 8 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Eastern Time. So thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you soon.
Okay, I think that is the end of our time, folks. Thanks again. Again, let's give a big hand to Toby, Ray, Aaron, Monique for their expertise, their wisdom, their stories, their practical advice. And please don't forget to copy and paste some of Ray, Aaron, and Monique's kind of like recommendations and advice and tips following this panel. So Kristen, I think I'm going to send it back to you to close us out. Yeah.
Wonderful. Yes, thank you so much. And we look forward to seeing everyone tomorrow morning for our opening session at 8 a.m. Mountain Time. So have a great rest of your day, and please take the Power of Us survey, check out the exhibitor booths, and in your free time, also complete the conference session evaluation. Thank you, everyone.